Welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be going into the world of rabies.
Specifically, rabies neuropathology.
Yes, rabies neuropathology.
Yeah.
And we're going to be focusing on a recent study from the Journal of Veterinary Medical Science, looking specifically at dogs in the Philippines.
It's a fascinating study that takes a deep dive into the brains of 70 rabid dogs.
70? Wow.
Yeah, they used microscopic examination and advanced visualization techniques to really see what's happening at a cellular level.
That's incredible. Now, I know rabies is a serious public health issue in the Philippines, and dogs are the primary carriers there. But I was surprised to learn that there hasn't been a whole lot of research specifically on rabies in dogs from this region.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes this study so important. It fills a critical gap in our knowledge. It gives us a detailed look at the neuropathological changes.
Which helps us understand the disease better and hopefully leads to more effective control strategies.
Exactly.
Now, before we get too deep into the study itself, let's just take a step back and make sure we're all on the same page about what rabies is and how it works.
Sure. Rabies is a viral disease.
A viral disease.
That attacks the central nervous system. It's typically transmitted through the saliva of an infected animal.
It's usually through a bite, right?
Exactly, most often through a bite. And unfortunately, once symptoms appear, it's almost always fatal.
That's scary stuff. Now, this study focused on a key hallmark of rabies infection.
Negri bodies.
Negri bodies. Can you explain what those are and why they're so important?
Yeah. Negri bodies are these abnormal inclusions.
Inclusions.
Essentially clumps of viral material that form within specific brain cells.
So they're like a sign, a red flag that rabies is present.
They're a very strong indicator. You don't find them in healthy brains.
So if you find Negri bodies, it's pretty much a slam dunk diagnosis for rabies.
They're considered a pathognomonic finding, meaning their presence is very specific for the disease.
That makes sense. Now, one of the things that jumped out at me from this study was the percentage of dogs that had detectable Negri bodies. They found it in 88.57% of the dogs.
That's a really high percentage. Significantly higher than what's typically reported in studies from other parts of the world.
What could account for that difference?
Well, it could be a number of things.
Like what?
It could be related to the particular strain of rabies virus that's circulating in the Philippines. Maybe it's just better at producing Negri bodies. Or it could have something to do with the stage of the disease at the time of death. Maybe the dogs in this study were further along in the course of the disease.
So the virus had more time to produce those inclusions.
Exactly. Or it could even be due to variations in how the tissues were prepared and examined.
Ah, so differences in lab techniques could also play a role.
It's definitely possible. So more research is needed to really understand why there's this discrepancy.
But regardless of the reason, the fact that they found such a high prevalence of Negri bodies suggests that traditional microscopic examination of brain tissue could be a very reliable diagnostic approach in the Philippines.
That's a key takeaway from this study.
Now, the study didn't just look at the presence or absence of Negri bodies. They also look at how they were distributed within different brain regions, right?
Absolutely. They looked at sections of the cerebrum, hippocampus, thalamus, and brainstem.
Wow, a very thorough examination.
They were very meticulous.
And did they find any patterns in terms of where the Negri bodies were most frequently observed?
Yeah, they found that Negri bodies were most common in the hippocampus and cerebrum.
Those are parts of the brain involved in memory and higher level thinking, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so Negri bodies love the hippocampus and cerebrum. What about the other regions?
They were less common in the thalamus and, interestingly, not detectable at all under the microscope in the brainstem.
No Negri bodies in the brainstem. But isn't the brainstem like the control center for all those essential life functions? It is.
So why wouldn't the virus be affecting that area?
That's a great question. It's possible that the virus behaves differently in the brainstem, or that the environment there somehow hinders the formation of Negri bodies.
Maybe the types of cells in the brainstem aren't as hospitable to the virus, or maybe the virus replicates differently in that region.
Those are all possibilities, and it's something that definitely warrants further investigation.
The study also mentioned something called pleomorphism in relation to Negri bodies. What does that mean?
Pleomorphism basically just means that the Negri bodies can vary in size and shape.
So they're not all identical.
Not necessarily. They found that in the cerebrum and hippocampus, the Negri bodies were typically large, round, or oval.
Okay, so big and well-defined in those areas.
But in the thalamus, they were much smaller and had this granular appearance.
Interesting. So the location in the brain seems to influence not just the presence of Negri bodies, but also what they look like. Exactly. And that raises some really interesting questions about the relationship between the virus and the host cells in different brain regions.
It seems like the virus might be interacting with different cell types in different ways.
Yeah.
Or maybe the environment within those different brain regions is somehow influencing the way the virus replicates and forms those inclusions.
That's the burning question, and it's something that future research will need to address.
Now, we've been talking a lot about Negri bodies, but the study also found something interesting about the brainstem, even though they couldn't see any Negri bodies there.
Right. They were able to detect the presence of the rabies virus in the brainstem using a technique called immunohistochemistry.
Immunohistochemistry, what a mouthful. Can you break that down for us?
It's often shortened to IHC. It's basically a way to visualize specific proteins within tissues using antibodies.
Antibodies, those are like the body's little defenders, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. They bind to specific targets. In this case, they used antibodies that bind to rabies virus proteins. And by labeling those antibodies, they were able to see where the virus was located.
Ah, so IHC is like a high-tech way to track down the virus.
It's a very sensitive and specific technique.
In this case, it allowed them to see the virus hiding out in the brainstem, even though there were no visible Negri bodies.
Which suggests that the virus might be present and active in that region without producing those characteristic inclusions.
Fascinating. So even though we think of Negri bodies as the hallmark of rabies infection, they might not tell the whole story.
Right. The absence of Negri bodies doesn't necessarily mean the virus isn't there.
This IHC technique sounds like it could be really valuable for diagnosing rabies, especially in cases where those classic Negri bodies are hard to find.
It could be a game changer.
So we've got this puzzle emerging. Negri bodies, the classic sign of rabies, are showing up in different amounts, looking different in different parts of the brain, and sometimes not showing up at all, even though the virus is clearly present.
It's a complex picture, that's for sure.
And it highlights how much we still don't know about the intricacies of this disease.
There's still a lot to learn.
Well, on that note, let's take a break and come back to explore some of the other fascinating findings from this study.
Welcome back to our deep dive. We've been talking about Negri bodies and how they can vary in appearance and even be absent in some cases.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery, isn't it? Why they're so prominent in some areas of the brain and completely absent in others.
Right, and even when they are present, they can look quite different depending on where you find them.
So it's not just a simple case of Negri bodies equals rabies. There's more to the story.
Exactly. And to really understand what's going on, we need to look beyond those characteristic inclusions and consider the broader context of the infection.
Like the immune response, how the body is fighting back against the virus.
Precisely. And that's where this study gets really interesting. They didn't just stop at identifying Negri bodies. They also delved into the inflammatory response in the brain.
Okay, so we've got these Negri bodies, these clumps of viral material, and now we're adding inflammation to the mix. What did they find?
They found that the areas of the brain with fewer Negri bodies, particularly the brainstem, actually showed more signs of inflammation.
Hold on. More inflammation where there's less evidence of the virus's signature inclusions. That seems counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it?
Based
You'd
on-
expect to see more inflammation in the areas where the virus is replicating most actively and forming those Negri bodies.
Yeah, that's what I would have thought. So what's going on here?
Well, it suggests that the immune response is more complex than we might initially think.
So even though we don't see those classic Negri bodies in the brainstem, the body is still recognizing the virus and trying to fight it off?
Exactly. And they were able to see evidence of that immune response through the inflammation they observed.
Okay, so inflammation is a sign that the immune system is active. But what exactly is happening at the cellular level? What are the players involved in this inflammatory response?
They found signs of perivascular cuffing.
Perivascular cuffing.
It's basically inflammation around the blood vessels.
So immune cells are gathering around those blood vessels, like soldiers setting up a perimeter.
That's a good analogy. They also found gliosis.
Gliosis.
It's an increase in glial cells.
Glial cells, those are like the support cells in the brain, right?
Exactly. They help maintain the environment of the brain and provide support for the neurons.
So gliosis means that those support cells are proliferating.
Right. It's a sign that something is going on. Something is disrupting the normal environment of the brain.
And in this case, that something is the rabies virus.
Precisely. The virus is triggering this inflammatory response, this mobilization of immune cells and glial cells,
And it's happening even in areas where we don't see those obvious Negri bodies.
which tells us that the immune system is engaged in a battle with the virus throughout the brain. It's not just limited to those areas where the Negri bodies are forming.
So it's like a widespread conflict.
Exactly. And the inflammation we see is a reflection of that conflict.
Now, I'm curious about the specific types of immune cells involved in this response. What did they find?
They used immunohistochemistry, or IHC, to look for markers of two key players in the immune system, T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes.
T cells and B cells. I remember learning about those in biology class, but it's been a while. Can you remind me what they do?
Sure. T lymphocytes, or T cells, are like the direct combatants of the immune system. They can directly attack and kill cells that have been infected with a virus.
So they're on the front lines seeking out and destroying the enemy.
Exactly. B lymphocytes, or B cells, are responsible for producing antibodies.
Antibodies, those are the proteins that can bind to the virus and neutralize it, right?
That's right. Antibodies can tag the virus for destruction or prevent it from infecting new cells.
So it's a two-pronged attack. P cells taking out infected cells, and B cells producing antibodies to prevent further spread.
That's a good way to put it. And what's significant is that this study found evidence of both T cells and B cells in the areas of inflammation within the brains of these rabid dogs.
So both arms of the immune system are active. The body is mounting a full-scale defense against the virus.
Precisely. The presence of these immune cells tells us that the immune system is recognizing the virus and trying to control the infection.
But even with this robust immune response, rabies is still almost always fatal.
Unfortunately, yes. The virus is very good at evading the immune system and causing widespread damage.
So the immune response, while valiant, is ultimately not enough to overcome the infection.
That's right. It highlights the need for preventative measures like vaccination to protect against rabies.
And it underscores the importance of understanding the immune response in more detail. If we can figure out why the immune system is unable to clear the virus, maybe we can develop strategies to boost its effectiveness.
That's a key area for future research. Unraveling the complexities of the immune response to rabies could hold the key to developing more effective treatments or even a cure.
It's a reminder that even in the face of a deadly disease, the body is constantly fighting back. And the more we understand about that fight, the better equipped we'll be to support it. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into rabies, from those microscopic Negri bodies to the body's immune response.
It's been quite a journey through the brain, hasn't it?
It really has. And I think one of the key takeaways for me is just how much we still don't know about this disease.
Absolutely. Every answer seems to lead to more questions.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I'd love to hear your thoughts on where the research goes from here. What are the most pressing questions that need to be answered?
Well, I think one of the biggest mysteries we've touched on is this whole issue of the immune response.
Yeah. Why is it that even with this robust immune response, the body is ultimately unable to clear the virus?
Right. We see these T cells and B cells rushing to the scene trying to fight off the infection, but it's just not enough.
So what's the missing piece of the puzzle? Why is the immune system losing this battle?
That's the million-dollar question. And there are a lot of potential avenues to explore.
Like what?
Well, one possibility is that the virus is somehow suppressing the immune response. Maybe it's interfering with the signaling pathways that activate the immune cells.
So the virus is essentially disarming the body's defenses.
Exactly. Or maybe the immune response itself is contributing to the damage.
We talked about the inflammation in the brain. Maybe that inflammation, while intended to help, is actually making things worse.
That's a possibility, and it's something that researchers are actively investigating.
It's a delicate balance, isn't it? The immune system needs to be strong enough to fight off the virus, but not so strong that it causes collateral damage.
Precisely. And finding that balance is a key challenge in developing effective treatments for rabies.
What about the virus itself? Is there anything about the virus that could help us understand why it's so deadly?
Well, one area that's been getting a lot of attention is the role of viral proteins.
Viral proteins.
These are proteins that the virus produces that help it replicate and spread.
Okay. And how might these viral proteins be contributing to the disease?
Well, some of these proteins may be interfering with the host's cellular machinery. They could be disrupting normal cell function or even triggering cell death.
So the virus is essentially hijacking the host's cells and using them for its own nefarious purposes.
In a sense, yes. And understanding how these viral proteins work could lead to new ways to target them with drugs.
So if we can block the action of these viral proteins, we might be able to stop the virus from replicating and spreading.
Exactly. It's a promising area of research.
What about vaccines? We know that vaccination is the most effective way to prevent rabies, but are there any new developments on the horizon?
There's always research going on to improve existing vaccines and develop new ones.
Exactly.
Well, one area of focus is on developing vaccines that provide longer-lasting immunity.
So you wouldn't need as many booster shots.
Exactly. That would be particularly beneficial in areas where access to healthcare is limited.
Makes sense. What about new ways to deliver the vaccine?
That's another active area of research. There's been a lot of interest in developing oral vaccines for wildlife.
Oral vaccines, like you just put it in a bait and the animals eat it?
That's the idea. It would be a much more efficient way to vaccinate wild animals, which are often the reservoir for the virus.
That would be amazing. It would be a game changer for controlling rabies in animal populations.
It would have a huge impact. And of course, there's always the hope of developing a treatment for rabies.
A cure.
It's a long shot, but researchers are exploring various approaches, including antiviral drugs and therapies that modulate the immune response.
So there's still hope for those who are infected with rabies.
It's important to never give up hope. Research is constantly advancing, and breakthroughs can happen when we least expect them.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive into the world of rabies. I've learned so much about this complex and often misunderstood disease.
It's been a pleasure sharing my insights with you and our listeners.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. We hope you've gained a new appreciation for the challenges and the promise of rabies research. From Vet Neurojar, keep those minds inspired, hearts light, and tails wagging.